going on, everyone? Welcome back into another episode of the Behind the Mic podcast, where we peel back the curtain into the sports media industry, find out all those inside it, who they are, and what makes them tick. Today, I'm joined by another very special guest, former Celtics beat writer, now one of the leaders of New England Basketball Journal, Steve Hewitt. Steve, before we get into what you're doing next and everything that's gone on in your wild last 24 hours, how you doing today? Thanks for joining me.
I'm doing good. I'm still a little tired. We launched yesterday the site and everything, and that was kind of a whirlwind, just kind of getting the stuff out there and getting all the reaction and feedback from everybody and everyone reaching out. It's a lot to take in over a short period of time, but I'm hanging in there. Awesome. Tried to sleep in a little bit this morning, but I'm good. Got some in me. I'm good. I'm good to go.
Awesome. There you go. I'm looking forward to kind of hearing how this whole thing came about. But first, I want to start with a segment I always start the show with called Resume Time. And basically, the floor is yours to tell us how you got to where you are now, obviously, with the New England Basketball Journal, but how your entire, I guess, what your resume looks like and how your journey went from, when you started working in sports media, the kind of internships and things like that you've done. So, floor is yours for how you got here.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's been 10 years since I graduated college now, and that's kind of where it all started for me. I went to UMass Amherst. Okay. Great 4 years, greatest 4 years of my life. And yeah, I never really knew what I wanted to do going into UMass, and I kind of caught on with the student newspaper there, the Daily Collegian. Okay. Shout out to all my collegian people, and kind of got started right away. I saw like an ad on Facebook when I was going into my freshman year. Someone advertising like, "Hey, come write for the Collegian if you're interested in sports." Like, I've always been a sports fan growing up. I'm from Taunton, Mass. Okay. Obviously, kind of grew up in the golden era of Boston sports and everything. And sports has always been a big deal to me. And I've always liked writing in classes. Weirdly, like, I'm one of those only kids that was like into like classes and stuff like that. So I was like, I'll give it a shot. I'll go down to the Collegian, see what happens. And I guess like 14 years later, here I am.
Now, did you go to UMass for like journalism or sports, or what were you there for?
So I honestly wanted. They have a pretty renowned business school, Eisenberg. Right. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but in some fantasy land, I thought maybe it'd be cool to maybe be like a sports agent or something. Okay. I don't know. I knew they had a good sports management program. I was like, oh, maybe I can do that. And I never got accepted to the business school. I took like one economics class my first semester freshman year. I'm like, wow, this is not
too many numbers.
Not it for me. I can't even get like through an intro class. I don't think this is destined for me. But at that point I had started working at the Collegian, and they gave me some lesser assignments, lesser sports like rowing and like and softball and some of the lesser glamorous sports, if you will. But I kind of loved it. I loved going to the games and getting access to the players and coaches, and being able to write about it, see my name in the paper. Back then we actually printed. I'm like dating myself now. They don't even print a newspaper anymore, but back then we did like a daily newspaper, and kind of worked my way up from there. They gave me a few shots covering the basketball team my freshman year, and I guess the editors, who are also students, liked me enough to keep giving me more opportunities. And before you know it, I was covering the football team. I was covering the UMass basketball team. I became the sports editor my junior year. I became editor-in-chief my senior year. I did a few internships, one at WEEI, and then one at Nesson. So I guess that kind of beefed up my resume. I made a few connections while I was at UMass too. I think that's what really helped me kind of take the next step in terms of finding a job. Yep. Two guys in particular, Steve Buckley, who I've maintained a pretty close relationship over over the years, and Bob McGovern used to work at the Herald. He left the business since, but they were sort of instrumental in kind of, because they were both working at the Herald at the time, and kind of introducing me to their leadership at the Herald. And it was funny when it was like kind of perfect timing when I was graduating from UMass. I was obviously looking for jobs, and it was just perfect timing. I think Mark Daniels actually was leaving the Herald at the time, and there was an opening for a part-time like editorial assistant at the Herald. And basically the gist of that is just like answering phones, a lot of like grunt work, like agate pages, scoreboard pages of the paper and stuff like that. And maybe if you're lucky, you get a few assignments here and there. And I had actually freelanced for the Herald while I was still at UMass. I covered like a UMass St. Joe's basketball game during my senior year. So they knew who I was, and they knew I had some quality work, I guess. And pretty much, yeah, I applied for the job. I sent my stuff in. C. Buckley called me, like, I think I was sleeping. It was one of those college weekends, Sunday morning, to tell me that there was a job opening. He's like, "Oh, you should send your stuff to Hank Hernowitz, who's a sports editor. Send your resume, send your best clips." I'm like, "Okay, I'm right on it. I'll do it right now." And before I know it, I was in there for an interview. A couple weeks later, I was hired. It was about a month after I graduated from college.
Wow.
So happened pretty quick. Got pretty lucky. That doesn't happen very often, I feel like. So it kind of went from there. Last 10 years at the Herald, doing a little bit of everything. Like I said, I kind of started as an editorial assistant part-time, and they would send me every now and then to like a Patriots mini camp practice or training camp practice. They'd send me to a Celtics game or whatever was kind of needed, kind of helping the beat writers. Back then we had a pretty loaded staff of beat writers. We had Karen Gresian, Jeff Howe on the Patriots, and Mark Murphy, Seabold Penn on the Celtics, and all on down the line. So did that for a while. Eventually, the 10 years is crazy. It's just like so much happened. I don't know how to kind of sort of come up, sort of put it together and pack it in here. But
yeah, you started, like you said, so part-time editorial, and then you moved to the Celtic or the Red Sox beat, and then the Celtics beat. I'm curious, like, was it difficult to move, like, learn everything that goes on with the Red Sox and like all the things that go on in baseball, and then all of a sudden you have to shift and learn basketball? Like, I just feel like you get so ingrained in one sport, and then to kind of flip, like, what was that like? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Like, how did you do that?
I actually think it was pretty easy, because for those, like, so when I started the Herald, it was 2014. I got promoted to the Red Sox beat in 2019. So those 5 years, I basically was like a general assignment reporter, and I would bounce around every day to a different team based on the needs. Like I said, if a beat writer was out, go in and cover a game. If they needed an extra help for a big game or something like that, go in. So I was always sort of paying attention to all the teams and what was going on. Like, I knew the storylines, I knew the angles, I knew the players, I knew the coaches. Just because that sort of helped me stay on my toes in a way, in terms of on any given day, I could be asked to go cover a Red Sox game or Celtics game. I don't know what kind of the day might present. And I kind of had to know at all times what was going on with those teams. So in 2018-19, right before I went on to the Sox beat, I've been covering a lot of Sox those 2 years, helping out. Back then it was Mike Silverman, Jason Mastrodonato on the Red Sox beat. I was kind of helping them out. I covered the entire 2018 playoff run.
That's awesome.
Went to the World Series.
Did you travel?
Huge career highlight. Yeah, I went to Houston for the ALCS. I went to LA for the World Series. I forget, it was a game 4, the Benintendi catch game in Houston.
Oh yeah, did that close the series out, or I can't remember now?
But up 3-1.
Okay.
But to this day, probably the most stressed I've ever been covering a game on deadline, because
that's right.
They had me write the game story for that game. So we're on a tight deadline. It's a newspaper deadline, and Heart Attack Kimbrel's on the mound.
Yep.
With, like, I don't remember if the bases were loaded, or I think there were multiple runners on, and then that ball goes into the outfield, and I'm like, oh my god, I'm about to have to rewrite my entire story, and
your fingers right over the backspace button, like, wait, yeah.
And then the most epic one of the most epic catches in Red Sox history happens. And I'm like, oh my god, I still have to rewrite it because something really epic just happened to win a playoff game. So yeah, back to the point. I had been covering a lot of Red Sox those 2 years, and I think that really helped prepare me to kind of jump into the Red Sox beat when I did, and I think it was September 2019. So it was kind of the end of the year anyway. That was a pretty mediocre year for the Red Sox. There wasn't playoffs to cover or anything, but and then for the Celtics, like I've always been a basketball guy, as you can see with being at the Basketball Journal now. And, I covered college basketball at the Herald. I was a top 25 voter. I covered a lot of Celtics too, in addition to the Red Sox and Patriots. So that wasn't a hard transition at all. Mm-hmm. Although the one hilarious and tricky part about it was when I moved from the Red Sox to the Celtics beat, was mid-season on the Red Sox in 2022. So this is September 2022, right after the Celtics made the NBA Finals. Mm-hmm. And they gave me like a week in between to kind of take a rest before I moved on to the Celtics beat. Mm-hmm. And there was no rest because of one Ime Udoka.
Oh, yeah. That's right.
That Wednesday night during that week off, quote unquote, is when the news broke about what he did in the suspension. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I'm like, are you kidding me? This is really my introduction to the Celtics beat. And then 2 days later, that I had to go to the press conference and for that and cover that entire mess and saga. So I had to really kind of learn to swim quickly on that. But to answer your question long-windedly here, I felt like I was pretty prepared in each of those roles I kind of took on, just because of the work I put in for those 10 years and all the different experiences I had, and always being on top of each sport and team.
So you mentioned Udoka. We don't have to get into it, but obviously it turns into Missoula. It turns into what the Celtics have obviously turned themselves into over the last 2-3 years. So before we get into what's going on at the New England Basketball Journal, you left the Celtics beat at an interesting time. I remember seeing that come across the Twitter timeline. I'm like, wow, they're about to go on a historic run here. So it all is working out, and we'll get into why and what the next step is. But how challenging was that to not only have to leave what was going on there again at the time of this historic run, but then see them winning the championship, and you could have been there, it could have happened like that. So what was the last 2-3 months like going on?
No, it's been really weird. It's been really weird because like I said, I grew up here. Basketball was like my first love growing up. The Celtics were my first team growing up, and when I went on the Celtics beat, like I knew like this team's on the brink of a championship. Like there's a really good chance here in the next few years when I'm on the beat that they could cover a championship. I could be in the building for that. That'd be pretty cool. As a kid who grew up a big Celtics fan, and remember vividly watching the 2008 championship and how emotional me and my family were watching that, and how cool that was. And to be in the building would be like a lifetime accomplishment. So it was definitely weird because I really envisioned the last 2 years a championship and covering a championship, and I knew this year they had the best chance. Obviously, they were favorites from training camp on, and and we'll get into everything that kind of happened, I guess. But it was sort of just kind of tough timing, and at first I was like all right with it, because they were just like blowing those teams out. And,
Yeah.
not to sound like conceited or anything, but like the cities that they were going to, I was like, oh, I'm not really missing out on too much. Like
Right.
Miami, I went to last year. That it'd be cool to go to Miami again. And then they went to Cleveland and Indiana. I was like, I'm not really losing sleep.
Tentpole cities across Middle America,
Yeah,
right?
I'm not
Yeah.
really losing sleep on the travel for that and covering those games. And
Fair.
but once they got to the finals, I was like, oh man, this is kind of a bummer. And like the move I made was the right move, like no question about
Yeah.
it. I'm really happy with my decision, and we'll get into that. But there was a part of me watching those games in the finals where I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
And then especially game 5 when they clinched it, I'm like, they did it at home and everything, and I'm seeing all the celebrations
Yeah.
and everything, and I'm like, man, it was a small sacrifice for what I did. I knew it was going to come. I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
But in the moment, it's just like, damn, could have been there. I move on, but it's just kind of one of those things. I had to do it for myself, and just kind of have to live with it. Maybe in the future there'll be another opportunity for it. But
So let's
definitely
get into that. Yeah, we'll get into the next chapter then. We'll talk about it because now with the New England Basketball Journal, a project with Siemens Media, you and Ethan Fuller are really taking the reins. I see you're the editor, and Ethan's gonna help you out with writing on there. So I'm curious, and again, another question, sort of like the resume, where the floor is yours. I want to hear, all about this project, how it started, how it came about. And what you guys are going to be covering, because I noticed just doing the quick research on it, it's more like amateur basketball at high school and the college stuff. And I think one thing that I've noticed with basketball around here in New England, it's gotten like a lot better over the last couple of years. I mean, Cooper Flagg's the obvious example, but I even think back like 10 years ago to guys like Nerlens Noel playing up in Tilton, and Terrence Clark, who unfortunately passed away, but like he was a local kid. Like there's a lot of good talent around here that should be covered more. So what's the deal with this? What are you looking forward to? And how is this going to go from here with you guys?
Yeah, I mean, wow, where do I start? I guess I'll start with like how this came about.
Yeah.
It was sort of earlier this year. So one of the coolest parts about this for me is I actually am getting to reunite with one of my former sports editors at the Herald, Sean Leahy, who, for viewers who are not familiar with him, he was a sports editor at the Herald. I forget what the exact years were, but it was when I first started at the Herald in 2014. He didn't hire me, but he came in a few months after I was hired, and I spent about 4 or 5 years with him at the Herald, and then he moved on to the Athletic, and then he moved on to Siemens Media, where we are now. He kind of reached out and recruited me for this opportunity, and I had known about Siemens Media from the outside. I knew about the Hockey Journal. I'm friends with Evan Marinofsky, who leads that brand, and I knew about them. I in the back of my mind, I've always been wondering, like, hey, when are they going to do a basketball journal? Because they already have hockey, baseball, lacrosse, soccer, like a lot of big sports. And I knew basketball at that level is pretty big around here. And as I've learned the last few months, maybe even bigger than I thought and more talented than I thought. So he kind of recruited me for this earlier in the year, and over the course of time, I came in for the interview, and this wasn't like something that was like even really posted online or really out there. I guess people are probably finding out about this like yesterday, like, but this has kind of been on my mind for the last like 4 or 5 months since Sean reached out to me for it. And I guess this was like sort of a perfect time for us to launch this with, like you said, Cooper Flagg, top recruit in 2024. He's from Maine. AJ DeBanza is the top recruit in the nation for 2025. He's from Brockton, Mass.
Okay.
Which I don't think that's ever happened where New England has kind of boasted the back-to-back number one consensus prospects. Right. So it's an incredible time for that. And We talked about the timing, kind of brutal timing with leaving the Celtics beat. That was part of the conversation. Like, hey, like they were like, hey, we want you to start like May 1st. Would that be okay with you? And I wasn't in a position to be like, hey, can I work another month and a half at this other job? Like, I don't want to make that kind of impression, obviously. In a perfect world, obviously, like, yeah, like cover a championship, kind of go out in the sunset of the 10 years and then move on to basketball journals, although that sounds pretty exhausting in my mind.
Yeah, right. Now that you think about it, now that you lay it out that way,
go through it all, and then like start a new thing like right away. That would have been a lot for sure. But yeah, where was I? So yeah, so we started in May 1st. The last 2+ months we've been working hard. So what New England Basketball Journal is will be a daily. We'll have a website, basketballjournal.com, daily content. We have a quarterly magazine, which was really well produced. We have John Kuchar, who I also worked with at the Herald at one point, designing the magazine, which is an incredible magazine. Hope you guys can hope some people can see it.
Of course.
And we'll have a podcast as well. I'm actually sitting in the podcast studio as we speak right here.
Nice.
But yeah, like honestly, like if this had never even like came to be, like obviously covering the Celtics, being a beat writer for the Herald, like I wouldn't have like any qualms about like I just could kind of move on in my life, kind of live that dream. But it's something about the opportunity really struck with me, and kind of a new challenge. You're at a place for 10 years, and not to say it got repetitive. It was like a really amazing 10 years, and I got to do a lot of amazing stuff. But I think it was like a perfect time for like a new challenge for me, to do something new. To kind of there aren't many opportunities, as you probably know, in this business, to go to a company that's really investing and really kind of like they created like an entire new brand. Like you don't really see a lot of media companies in 2024 sort of expanding and growing like that. So that really appealed to me, to kind of work at a place that's really investing and really cares about their product and really has a purpose to what we're doing every day. And like I said, working with Sean, who I had an amazing rapport with when I was at the Herald for those 4 or 5 years. We kind of hit the ground running right away once we reunited. And for me, like the last 10 years, I've been covering a lot of pro and college sports.
Yeah.
Never really dove into this world of amateur basketball, high school, preps, AAU. And that was something that really appealed to me too.
Yeah.
A new fun challenge to kind of learn a new section of basketball. I've always been a basketball guy. But to kind of learn about that scene over the last 2 months and kind of connect with those programs, those coaches, some of the kids, that was like a really cool opportunity for me. And one thing, like I kind of knew this going in, kind of thought about this going in, and it's sort of met my expectations in that regard, is that these communities like really care deeply about their kids. These families care about their kids and their schools, and it just matters to people at this level of AAU high school basketball, because no one's really paying attention to them yet. They're not famous. They're not. They don't have millions of followers. They don't have millions of dollars. They kind of just they're looking for some attention. They're looking for to make the next step in their career. They're really, for lack of a better term, they're not nobodies, but they're not known like they are in like. It's funny I keep saying this, but like Jaylen Brown doesn't care about what I write about him. He's just fulfilling a media obligation.
Of course.
And if they had it their way, they probably wouldn't want to talk to us. But they have to do it. It's kind of part of the gig. But when I talk to these coaches, these players, these families, like they really like love that coverage. It like makes their day to see like a story written about them, and that's kind of rewarding to me. When I look at like maybe my favorite stories that I've done in the past, like it's those kinds of stories where it really touches a community, or
Mm-hmm.
you're talking to a player that's really has like an inspiring story, and you're able to tell that story. Like that stuff's really rewarding to me. So that's been really fun to do the last 2 months, and obviously leading up to the launch, all the work we've done, and yeah, so it just kind of checked a lot of boxes for me
Awesome.
with what I was looking for. If I wanted to make a next step in my career, and when the opportunity presented itself, and I kind of thought about all those things, like it just made sense for me. So I'm really happy, and the launch went perfectly. Like the reception's been great.
Awesome.
So we're having a lot of fun with it. Yeah,
Cool.
it's gonna be really cool, I think.
It's it's definitely unique, I think, and you touched on it a little bit, but like I feel like high school coverage, at least around here, high school and amateur and even the AAU scene, like there isn't a lot of coverage on it. It's
No.
like I feel like at least back, I mean, this is a while back, but like when I was in high school and kind of when I played high school sports, like there was like Max Preps, which was super generic, and there's no real like feature stories and things like that. And then even like some of the high school coverage with the Globe and the Herald, I mean, they do a good job, but it's not their sole focus. It's all, it's a lot of pro heavy stuff. So
Yeah.
this is definitely unique, and I think it's a cool way to tell their stories. And you mentioned it too, like they actually care about what's being written about them as opposed to something Jaylen Brown has to say in front of the media.
Right. Yeah. And you mentioned the Globe and Herald. I think they do a great job with their preps high school coverage. But what I've noticed is they're very traditional in the way they do their coverage. It's a lot of the public schools in Massachusetts that they cover, and those really aren't where the top kids from the area are playing.
Right.
I was at a commitment announcement last week for Jalen Harrell.
Mm-hmm.
He's a 4-star. He's a Massachusetts Gatorade Player of the Year last year. He plays at Cats Academy in Cambridge.
Okay.
And I don't think many people know who he is because he doesn't get covered.
Right.
So Cats Academy, they're in the NEPSAC, which is kind of the New England prep school league, if you will, where they have like 4 or 5 different classes based on a bunch of different factors.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the NEPSAC really doesn't get covered, like you said.
Yeah.
Those are the top of the kids who are coming out of Massachusetts. And you'll get a few MIAA public school kids going to play college basketball, but that's not really where the best players are, and those don't really get covered, like you said. I was at a few showcases in the past few weekends. The NEPSAC does these like summer showcases where the teams get together and kind of play some games in the summer, and there really wasn't any media people there. There's like some independent guys that do it themselves, whether it's like through a podcast or through their own Twitter. But it's not, I don't think it's like their full-time job.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to do, we're really going to attack that level of basketball and like do it at a really high level that we believe it deserves. Cause a lot of these kids end up going Division I. Like you look at Cooper Flag right now. He's dominating Team USA Olympics training camp. A lot of these kids might not be at the Cooper Flag level, but they're going to high level Division I teams. There's been so many kids from New England that make it to the NBA, and no one really knows until they make it to the NBA that they're actually from here.
Yeah, you look at a guy like the Sheet or whatever. He's like, oh, like Pat Connaughton's from around here. Like I barely heard about it. Like that he played for Notre Dame in Baltimore, the Orioles, whatever. But you never heard his name until he was actually at Notre Dame. So
yeah, so well, and we're gonna do it on the girls' side too. There's a lot of amazing talent on the girls' side. Ethan's kind of taking care of the girls' side. I'm focused on the boys' side. And we're gonna do it. We're gonna do as much as we can. Obviously, there's 2 of us. There's like a million. There's like a million schools to cover, a million players to cover. But there's so much talent, that probably more than I thought there was.
Yeah.
Like the kid Jalen Harrell I just mentioned, he's going to Providence next year. I did a profile on a kid from Putnam Science in Connecticut, who's in Providence this fall. This kid Oswin Ursamwa, Nigerian big man. Both those guys have NBA potential, and it's time for people to kind of know about them and be able to share their stories. It's also kind of cool for me to kind of get on the ground floor with them before they become like
Yeah.
whoever they end up being. That's kind of a cool opportunity for me, and sort of get to know them and connect with their families, and be able to tell their story and kind of be the first to tell
Right.
someone's story. Like Ethan did a fabulous feature on this girl Ella Peeper, who's going into her freshman year
Oh, wow.
at Dexter Southfield High School next fall, and she can already dunk. She dunked at like
That's insane.
at 8th grade, and she's like one of the best prospects in the area. And
Wow.
we can say we wrote the first like story about her. We kind
Right.
of maybe not uncovered her, maybe a little bit. But we're identifying these kids before they become who they end up being, and I think that's a fun part. We can like maybe look in 5-10 years and see where they become, and say, hey, we covered them when they were in 8th grade, 9th grade, and we kind of saw the potential, and then this is where they become. So that's kind of cool.
That's awesome. No, this is cool. I'm glad we can kind of shed some light on this and talk about it, because I'm looking forward to following along, and I think it's a space where basketball is so popular around here, obviously with the Celtics and the trickle down into some of the higher end colleges and Providence College to talk about it, but you don't get into the lower levels, the nitty gritty of high schools, if you will. So if you haven't, follow along with not only Steve on Twitter, but also check out the New England Basketball Journal, and we'll promote it as much as possible we can on here, because again, I'm looking forward to following along just as much as I think everybody else is. So all right, before we get you out of here, before we give you our fast 5 to finish rapid fire questions, I'm curious about overarching working in this field from where you started to where you are now, your favorite and least favorite part in working in the industry. And I always give this caveat, and everybody's heard it from here on out on this, but like least favorite part, like I know we're covering sports. It's not, we're not digging ditches. It doesn't really suck that much. But what's kind of a pain in the ass that people might not know about, and what's your favorite part?
Yeah, I try not to. I get made fun of by some of my friends when I complain about like really tedious things about our industry. And like, oh, cool, Steve, you're covering the Red Sox in the World Series or the Patriots in the Super Bowl. Like, it's like spare us.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, exactly.
But I guess one thing, I hate transcribing.
Okay.
For any writer or reporter who they know what I'm talking about, especially the last 2 months, where most of the stories we've been doing the last couple months are feature stories where we're doing like long interviews with some of these kids and coaches that can span 30 to 45 minutes. Just such a time consuming. And I know there's been apps that have been made to kind of help the process, but they're not accurate.
You still got to read through the entire transcription to make sure.
Yeah, because you don't want to be wrong.
Right.
So that's a pain in the ass. It's always been a pain in the ass. Always will be a pain in the ass. So yeah, that's probably my least favorite part. I can't really think of anything else that's like that really comes to mind with that, but that's definitely one. And then favorite thing, it's probably maybe a little bit of a cop out. I mean, just like, I guess in my career, just the experience I've had. I covered the World Series, I covered the Super Bowl, covered the NBA Finals. I just got to cover the NCAA Elite Eight at the Garden, being courtside for that. Like those are all amazing experiences. My favorite part is probably just the satisfaction I have when I come up with a story idea, like a good feature story idea, and it like executes it. Like, I executed it like exactly the way I wanted to. Like for New England Basketball Journal, I guess I'll plug for that. But
plug away.
Our cover story is about Cooper Flagg and his impact on Maine, and that was just something we were trying to think of story ideas in the pre-planning launch process, and it was just something that like randomly came to my mind in a moment. I was like, oh, we can do something on Cooper Flagg. Like, what can we do about Cooper Flagg? Obviously, he's going to Duke this fall. He's not going to be playing in New England anymore, but there's a story to be told about his impact in New England. And so I talked to a bunch of his people in his circle from Maine about just how much he's impacted Maine and inspired some of these kids coming up in Maine, and sort of inspired the next generation of Maine basketball with some of the teams that have been created and things of that nature. And it basically came out exactly the way I wanted to. And so that's pretty rewarding to always see that. And then as a newspaper guy, whenever you see your name in print or your final product in print for everyone to see, that's always like a really cool feeling. And that'll never get old for me, whether it was at the Herald when I was writing anything, picking up the paper and seeing my name on there, or we just got the first copy of the magazine yesterday in the mail. And we were able to kind of flip through and see our work. And that was like pretty cool to see, because we worked hard the last two plus months to come up with all that content and work. So that's always really cool to see.
That's awesome. Yeah. All right, fast five to finish. Fast five rapid fire questions for you, Steve.
I'm nervous.
Before we get you out of here, it's not that bad. It's really not that bad. Number one, what is your favorite thing to do outside of sports?
Does playing a sport count?
Is it golf?
No.
Okay, everybody says golf, and I'm like, it's kind of a sport, but I'll give you it. What's your favorite
thing? People who know me think I'm a psycho, but I'm a big runner.
Okay.
I've run 8 marathons.
Wow.
I've done Boston 4 times.
Okay.
So that's a big passion for me outside of work. Running does a lot of different things for me. It's sort of therapeutic in a lot of ways. It's competitive, kind of feeds my competitive drive a little bit.
Yeah.
So running's a big part of outside of work for that.
I've gotten into running as well over the last couple years, and I ran the Maine Coast Marathon this year.
Oh, congrats.
And thank you. I don't know how the hell you ran 8, because I'm like dreading my next one. I don't know if I could ever do it again. I want to do Boston, but I'm like the training and you stop the race and your knees are like dead, and it's just like it's super fun. But congrats on doing 8. That's insane.
Every time it's the hardest thing I've ever done. Every time I do it.
Oh yeah.
But to cross that finish line is always such a sweet feeling too.
Yeah, so. I'm with you. All right, number 2. What's the most memorable moment you've had working in the sports media industry so far?
Oh man, that's a good one. This might be a little recency bias, but when I was at the and I've already mentioned I've covered the World Series, I covered the Super Bowl. So being in those locker rooms after the team wins the championship, that's like top of the top right there.
Yeah. What was the best one?
The best one I've covered?
Yeah, the best.
I only did 2. I did the Red Sox in 2018 and the Super Bowl, which was like 2 months after the last Brady Super Bowl.
Oh yeah, that's right. Okay.
I think I'd have to give it to the Red Sox.
Okay.
The celebration was pretty wild. So the Dodger Stadium visiting clubhouse is very small, and we were all trying to like pack in there, and it was just insanity in there, and the champagne's flying everywhere. We got all soaked, obviously.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So the Patriots one was probably less so crazy, because we didn't really get into the locker room when they were like really celebrating.
Yeah.
It was a lot of press conferences and kind of running around, but I'll take the Red Sox one for that.
Got it.
And then a couple months ago when I was covering the Elite 8, this was like a sort of a cool like cap your Herald career moment, is when I was covering UConn's crazy run. I was sitting courtside, and I noticed Larry David sitting across from us in like row 2 behind the scorer's table. So at halftime, I'm a big Seinfeld fan. That's like my favorite show of all time. So I was like, I have to go over and try to get a picture. And if he says no, if he tells me to F off, I have an amazing story.
You tried
David
it.
Told me to F off. And we went, me and Trevor Haas, who works at the Globe, we went over there at halftime. And I think he perceived us to be important, because we had like the credential badges around, and we were coming from the court. We weren't like fans coming like
behind him, behind his back. Yeah.
Right. So we were on the court, and we walked up to him. We snapped a few pictures together, and I muttered some words about how Seinfeld was my favorite show, and I think he just stared at me.
I was gonna say, was he nice? Did he give you anything back, or was he?
Oh, he was good. He was good. He was nice to take the pictures. He just gave me kind of like a nod, like, okay, that's
so funny.
It's like a classic Larry David thing. But that was like that was a really cool moment for me.
That's
Yeah.
sick.
Yeah.
Those are both pretty good. All right, number 3. What is the best advice you've received while working in the sports media industry?
Oh man, ooh, you're putting me on the spot with that one. I don't know. Can we come back to that?
Yeah, come back to it.
I don't
Chew
know.
on it.
I don't know if that, like, I'm trying to think. I will say, like, maybe this can answer it, but I've just had so many like great mentors over the years.
Yeah.
Working at the Herald, and just like the legends that kind of came through the Herald above me, like Karen. Karen is like my grandma from like another grandma.
Yeah.
Steve Buckley, Jeff, all down the line. Like they've all sort of imparted. I kind of learned just kind of from watching.
Yeah.
And sort of observing how those people do their work. And I don't know if there's been like specific advice that someone gave to me as much as I'm just like really observing, especially when I was younger, when I really didn't know what I was doing. I was always just kind of watching them and reading their stuff and kind of figuring out like the best way to attack a story. And I learned a lot just from kind of watching and talking to them generally over the years. So it's kind of a cop-out answer. I don't know if I have like specific advice.
No, that's good. The advice you can turn it into is just watch what the good people around you are doing and then fake it till you make it, right?
Yeah. Always read other people's stuff. You can get better just from reading someone else, and can find a different way to attack a story or see how they do it. I don't know. There's different things you can take from everybody.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. Number 4, what would you be doing for work if you weren't working in sports media?
Oh man. This really has been my life for like the last 14 years. So I don't know what I would be doing. I guess go back to if I had not failed my first economics class at UMass, maybe I'd be like a sports agent or representative of an athlete or something like that. I always knew I wanted to be in sports in some capacity.
Yeah.
Maybe I'd be a runner. I don't know.
Not bad. You'd be in Paris for the Olympics.
Yeah, maybe if I had noticed that I loved running as much as I do now back when I was in high school, I probably would have probably put more focus into it. And maybe, who knows, I've always been like a decent athlete. Like I played soccer and I did track, and I played basketball for a little bit too. And if I really maybe focused on running and a certain event, maybe I'd be going to Paris in a few months.
There you go. All right. And number 5, to close it out, not sports related at all, Steve, but what is your favorite pizza topping?
Oh, wow. I'm going to go chicken bacon ranch.
Love it.
At UMass, we have a classic staple called Antonio's in downtown Amherst. If you've ever been to Amherst,
I went to Worcester State, and there's an Antonio's in Worcester as well.
Worcester too, yeah. So every time I go to Antonio's, every time I'm stopping in Amherst, and I always go to Antonio's and grab a slice or two of chicken bacon ranch and bring it home.
Love it.
So that's my go-to.
Cool. All right. Well, Steve, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate the time. This was fun.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Mike. That was awesome.
Yeah, of course. If you haven't already, go check out the New England Basketball Journal through Siemens Media. Steve and Ethan Fuller are starting that up over there. It's going to be fun to follow along. So make sure you check it out. And for those who haven't yet, make sure you follow along with the Behind the Mic podcast at Behind Mic Pod on Twitter, on Instagram, and you can get us wherever you get your podcast. So thanks again to Steve Hewitt for joining me, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks.